call the meeting to order. Thanks everyone for coming. First item on the agenda this evening is to review and approve the minutes from the previous meeting. If anybody has any updates or changes, if you'd be kind enough to share them. Otherwise, I would look for a motion to approve the minutes, please.
I just have a misspelling for my name under the standard section.
Trying to see if you read through them.
I'll move to approve with the amendment.
We've got a motion to approve with the amendment. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We've taken care of the minutes for this evening. Thank you. Next item is a public hearing for the Bigelow Voigt 8th subdivision final plat.
Yes, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, I'm gonna hop this on here. This first application is, final plat. You have two projects on your agenda tonight that need reviewed that are preliminary plats. I know you've got a couple other items on there as well, but the first one here outlined in yellow is the Bigelow Voigt. This is a final plat application, public hearing, and, this, if you recall, was approved earlier this year in a preliminary plat and approved as a PUD. And at that time, there were a number of conditions on the PUD. The PUD was a general and final PUD, and so it required a number of modifications and amendments as it moved from a preliminary standpoint to a final standpoint. So this is the location of the Bigelow Voigt project. Rich, Matthew, right?
Yeah.
Is here on the applicant's behalf. I don't think anybody else is here on the applicant's behalf. Brandon will be here shortly. He's running a little bit late, but engineering stuff, he'll hopefully be able to answer questions. I'll give you a general overview of it. Your staff report has a lot of information in it. It is essentially, I'm going to just walk through this real quick. The PUD is basically very similar to the preliminary plat that was approved. There's a few minor tweaks to it. And I'm just going to flip down here to that and walk through those minor changes to it. We use the terminology generally consistent with the preliminary plat. There is basically one lot that changed here from a single-family home to a stormwater pond. So as they went through the detailed engineering in the stormwater, they needed additional capacity for that. And so that lot went away, and the storm ponds are there. The rest of it is pretty similar. Some of the conditions that are outlined in the staff report that they did. What you're looking at here is the revised PUD to address the conditions that were approved as part of the preliminary PUD approval. Preliminary plat approval in the PUD plan. So the trail corridor, which originally was shown kind of running along the westerly property line of the second lot, now we've got it essentially going to be between the two stormwater ponds on an existing sanitary sewer easement that will run through there. Not ideal, but it does continue to keep it close to this greenway corridor here. If I flip back to this, you can see how that greenway corridor kind of runs through there and then connects down to the park here. And so if we can try to keep that as an off-street trail, that's the intent behind that. And then by and large, the rest of the items remain the same. This portion on the east side are attached townhomes. The portion on the west side are single-family lots, ties into the 6th subdivision on the west here. This street does not continue through. This is a large outlot here, largely for stormwater and also an existing utility easement that brings the water line through the site, but the street does not continue through simply because of the impact on the drainage way and the natural sources. We are continuing with recommendation for park dedication to be cash in lieu of. The park is actually served by that park to the southwest here, and so cash in lieu of land is the approach here for the park dedication. So at a high level, that's pretty simple from a final plat standpoint. We are working through the details of this. You have all those details in the engineer's review. They've met most of those, and there's a few minor tweaks that are yet to be done to some of those conditions. And so with that, I would open it up to any questions, and it is a public hearing still for a final plat.
Any questions so far, gentlemen?
None for me.
If not, we'll go ahead and open up the public hearing. If you have any thoughts you'd like to share on the matter, if you'd be kind enough to come up to the podium and give us your name and address, please. If not, I will go ahead and close the public hearing. Thank you. Gentlemen, your thoughts?
And I'm happy to go over anything in more detail if you need it.
Have these engineer comments made available to the property, the developer?
Yes. Brandon, at WHKS has worked pretty closely with, the engineering team and, Mr. Bigelow to work through the comments, and it's our understanding they're comfortable with all the comments that are in there.
I think most of the changes were made as of, they're still in the process today yet, but
Yeah.
there should be pretty much done.
We feel like we're in pretty good shape with this one.
I'm fine, we're comfortable with things like snow removal in these cul-de-sacs.
As far as I know, yes, I think.
It's private, so.
Yeah.
There is no city snow removal.
That's correct. There are private streets, and there will be governed by an association that covers maintenance and those kinds of things, which would probably include snow removal too, but we'll make sure it is. And I know it was reviewed by, I believe it was reviewed by the fire department too. Yeah.
Just very quickly, do we know the depth of those ponds that are gonna be split by the trail? It's kinda hard to read the lines here.
Yeah, we'll see if I can figure that out.
There's an in-depth one on page, way down towards the bottom.
Here, I got it right here. So it looks like
10 feet deep.
we go from 12, 14, about 12, 4, looks like 10 to 12 feet roughly. Be 8 feet on this one. Well, no, it's about 10 to 12 feet between the two of them, roughly.
Don't they have a steeper area, then a gradual, then it
Yep,
shallows out, then it gets steeper again?
looks like it, yeah.
I hate to open Pandora's box, but does that bring into question whether we need to fence that? Keep kids out of it, or they'll be on the trail? Just raising the question,
For the amount of water that would actually be standing, I mean, you're not gonna have 12 feet of water in there consistently all the time, so I mean, even with our heavy, I mean, and Rich, you can talk to that a little bit too if you wanted, but.
I think probably the
Even
amount of
on our
standing
heavy-
water is gonna be 3 feet or less, if I remember, the wet pond
Yeah.
is that.
Okay.
Just being a big storm event is when they would be
Yeah.
able to meet that capacity for
Okay.
12 hours or whatever it is.
That other pond is existing, is it not? The one up to the west, which is about the same depth?
This one here.
Yeah, that one's.
Well, we had started something there, I think we're gonna have to modify
I
it.
think it has,
Okay.
yeah, there's, it's part of the improvement plan.
Okay, right.
So
Yeah,
the
because
question
I think
is-
all along that whole wetland along that park has been constantly, and over the last few years,
Think
since
you
houses
see-
have been developed, that's been.
Good timing, Brandon.
Well, and it's been updated, you know, they've done improvements to try and get that water to flow through.
Yeah, so this should help.
Yeah, you know.
Brandon, question was asked about the depth of the ponds and kind of if we need to consider any kind of security to keep kids out of them, if they're deep enough, if they're wet enough.
Well, the Minnesota Stormwater Manual actually says do not put fence around ponds. That's been the design standard in all the slopes in that meet the slope requirements. And you see something on there is a 10-foot bench at the bottom, so if you were to go down that slope, you would hit a 10-foot bench, 10 foot wide, that's like a foot deep, yeah, right where Brett's cursor is there.
Yep.
So that's being provided on the wet ponds, so they will be holding water. And then along the Comment to the right there where we have the bike trail through there. The Minnesota DOT's trail manual requires additional 5 feet, like if we're gonna put a 10-foot trail, additional 5 feet in each side. So that's being accommodated on the one trail as part of our construction.
Does that answer the question?
Yep.
Okay, good.
With that clarification and the understanding that, all the comments have been addressed by the developer, I'll move to approve this final plat.
We have a motion, do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Any additional comments, questions? Motion and a second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Subdivision final plat has been approved. Topics 4 and 5 this evening are fundamentally the same project. It was recommended that we actually tackle these with a single public hearing unless there's any thoughts to the contrary of that.
Makes sense.
With that said, the next item up on the agenda is the public hearing for the Meadowbrook second preliminary plat and second final plat.
Okay, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, this is Meadowbrook, second edition. The history of this, as I understand it, was reviewed and approved in September of 2017, largely in its similar state to what it is currently. And for whatever reason, they didn't continue with the recording of the plat, so it needs to go back through the process. So that's why we're doing it consecutive, or we're doing it together, the preliminary and final plat. Normally, we wouldn't take preliminary and final plat with this large of a project together, but since you've already approved it and it's largely the same, we decided to do that in order to keep it moving forward. This is the site location, and the first thing I just want to talk about is a really important consideration is what happens in between here, and thinking about what happens here within that. So I'm assuming that was discussed as part of the 2017 discussion, and this is actually, at the time, it was called the General Development Plan. We're proposing changing that. So this is really a concept, and that's all this is. I don't want anybody to think that this is an entitled development, but it shows basically that there was some thought given to how this area develops. So the piece that we're looking at now for subdivision is up to the north here. Actually, this one right here is what it is. And so considerations given to how does the site ultimately connect down to the Diamond Park in the south, since this is the park that would predominantly serve that area, whether it's in its existing configuration or with future development of the rest of this if it's an expanded configuration. There's a draw that kind of goes through here that you can really see good when you start to look at this aerial photo, and you start to see, well, maybe you don't see the topo here, but there's a draw that comes down this way, which is why they've shown the storm pond here that would provide a lot of the drainage through the rest of the area. And so a lot of the detailed documents that are in your final plat application include some of that stormwater pond detail, and again, Brandon can talk to those if need be. So the final plat meets, both the preliminary plat and the final plat meet all the requirements for the zoning code in terms of lot sizes and density. It is consistent with the comprehensive plan. There was a point made in the engineer's memo about a trail corridor, and I'll just flip down here to the actual plat, maybe that's easier to talk through. There is a discussion, this is 14th Street going north and south here, about this sidewalk being more of an expanded trail, and that means it's essentially enhanced trail that would ultimately be that trail that connects down to Diamond Park, and again, that's consistent with the comprehensive plan. In an ideal world, you look at this greenway feature, which is Maston Creek, and you think, can we create something like what we did with Bigelow Voigt and have a trail adjacent to the creek? In this particular case, we've got really steep grades. You can start to see those contours here, and some of you are probably very familiar with that creek. It would be really difficult to get any kind of trail too close there. Plus, we've already got a lotting pattern that was approved back in 2017 that kind of sets that basis. So we're not suggesting that we try to get a trail corridor next to the creek. to the extent the rest of this develops to the south, maybe there's opportunities to create kind of windows to it just for a public benefit. But this sidewalk would be a recommended 10-foot wide trail. It's always difficult. We want to try to avoid having trails cross a bunch of individual driveways, but the way this is laid out, that's kind of what we're faced with in this segment. We might think about future plats that come to the south, trying to head that off at the concept level, if we can figure out how to design a trail so that you're not running it right against a bunch of driveways, whether it's side lots, or whether different lot block configurations, we can think about that in the future. So from a final plat and preliminary plat standpoint, this meets those requirements. Again, there's a number of engineering comments. They're pretty basic technical issues that have been addressed as we move through the process, and again, I think we're pretty close on this one. And if you've got questions, again, we're certainly welcome to address those, and the engineer's memo also is in the packet as well. That also has been provided to the applicants, and they're comfortable with everything that's in it. So with that, any questions?
If I recall, the biggest sticking point was that stormwater pond at that 2 years ago, or 3 years ago.
Correct, that's my understanding on why kind of the plug was pulled, previous, discussions with the stormwater pond on the property to sell. I think the developer thought they had an agreement on there, and it's something that's coming, back, into the fold and having some agreement with that stormwater pond that's ultimately required there to the south on what Brad has pulled up there, so. That is moving forward, that'd be like a first phase of a larger pond. With this first development, it's a kind of small in scale compared to the drainage rate of that pond, so we'd be building kind of phase one of a regional pond. And then when that area is developed in the future, they'd be looking at that pond and working out what that pond would look like. I'm comfortable with kind of how it sits in there now, it's in the right spot, so it'll be a future developer's problem when they're developing that large area in there, so.
And the underlying lot lines that you see here, again, are just concept. I think it's good that they put that in. Thinking about it, certainly there'd be some tweaks and modifications to it, but at least there's some thought given to how that pond would fit in there with a lotting pattern. We did kind of tinker with that a little bit in our office, and there's a number of different things you could do, and still retain the same lot yield to work around that pond, and even make it a kind of an amenity type product.
That'd be unique. There isn't many storm ponds around here that would consider it to be an amenity.
Ideally, that's the way you do it. But recognize there's a cost to it.
Good? If there's not any other questions, I'll go ahead and open up the public hearing for both the preliminary and secondary, or preliminary and final plat for Meadowbrook. If anybody has any thoughts or comments they would like to share with us. If not, we will go ahead and close the public hearing. Thank you.
And Mr. Chair, it is okay if you take these in one motion, both preliminary and final plat, that's fine for this action.
Thank you. Any thoughts, gentlemen, Mr. Chair?
Looks like they thought it all up to me.
We discussed it at several meetings, I think, several years ago, so.
If there are no questions or thoughts or concerns, I would look for a motion, please.
I'll move to approve both the preliminary and the final plat for Meadowbrook. I think it's the right title. Meadowbrook
Second.
Second Sub.
We have a motion to approve the preliminary and final plat. Is there a second?
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Both plats have been approved. Thank you.
And both of these will go to the September 23rd council meeting, I believe.
Thanks.
Thanks very much.
Good seeing you, Eric.
Yeah, good seeing you guys.
Next up, public hearing, updated Casson zoning code.
Okay. All right, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, so this is something you've obviously been working on for quite some time. And we've been working with you for quite some time on this. So it's just kind of a culminating, step in the process with the public hearing. You have in your staff report kind of a summary of the, zoning code amendments as well as, the maps that show the different jurisdictions or districts and the changes that we made. We also included a link to a table that showed kind of before and after. We did this sort of after our last conversation. I thought it would be helpful to see the old district, the most relevant new district, and what kind of uses changed from district to district. So we did that to try to get a feel also for, are we creating situations where we have a lot of nonconformities? The reality is we're probably gonna create some. We're gonna create some that we just don't know about right now because we don't know a whole lot of detail on the physical use on the property. And so what I'll say is, we are taking an action where we're repealing something and replacing it with new, and we're never gonna get it 100% right, but I think we're gonna get a lot better than what it has been. And we know that as we start administering this, when people come in and they wanna do something, whether it's adding on to a building, whether it's changing their use, whether it's subdividing or platting new land, we may run into situations where all of a sudden we learn, oh, we have a nonconformity now that we created before that we really didn't dive into the details on because we just don't have the capacity to do it. And so I just say that because I think we have to recognize that zoning codes, zoning ordinances, they get amended from time to time, and just because we adopt this all new doesn't mean it's perfect and that it's not gonna be amended even, you know, in the next couple weeks, or next couple months, or the next year. And so keep that as in the back of your mind and an open mind about being willing to accept changes that come forward, and know that we have a comprehensive plan vision that helps us evaluate whether that change is a good idea or not. So with that, I don't want to go through this in tremendous amount of detail with you. It is a public hearing if we've got people that want to comment on it. And then I prefer to kind of take it on a question and answer basis with you. We did post all of this information online and send out notices, I think via email, or I'm looking at Linda.
The newspaper.
Newspaper.
It was in the newspaper, and it's been on the website.
Yep. And so we didn't do individual meetings or individual notices with people. It was available publicly on the website. But beyond that, that's the extent of the engagement we did. We have not gotten any feedback on that. And so I will hope that you take the public hearing tonight and then discuss, do we need to do more? And if so, what more do we need to do on this? So with that, I don't think I want to go through this in detail, but I'm happy to respond to questions. Either the public hearing generates them, or if you have specific questions. I have everything on my computer here, so we can throw it up on the screen and search through it and dive into the details on it.
Thank you, sir. Any questions before I open up the public hearing? No? With that said, I'll go ahead and open up the public hearing, and this is on the updated Casson zoning code. If you have any thoughts you'd like to share with us, if you'd be kind enough to come to the podium, please. If not, I will go ahead and close the public hearing. It's a little tough doing this without any feedback.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so, yeah, and it's not so much that I am fearful of anything of the things that we've been discussing, but, I mean, you can ask my wife, she'll be the first to tell you that I'm a flawed individual, so I'm getting some amount of feedback.
I think we're all in that boat.
I'll throw myself under the bus. If you wanna join me, you're more than welcome to, but it would be very uncommon, I guess, for us to go out and try to solicit some additional feedback, but given the scope and the magnitude of some of the things that we're discussing, it may very well be appropriate. Even something as simple as putting a flyer in mailboxes, if that is within the scope of appropriate.
When does the newsletter go out?
Utility bills go out the 25th. I think she's gonna try and get them out, the 24th or 25th. So the newsletter go out then.
And, Linda, did we push anything out on Facebook?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. It was a reference back to the website.
Yeah, right, which is where we wanted them to go, yeah.
Right.
Guess I haven't been looking enough.
Well, even some of the more, and I mean this in a very positive note at this stage in the game, some of the more critical, squeakier wheels that have taken residence in this town, it's a little bit surprising that not one of them will come up here to share a thought or an opinion.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, no matter how thorough we try to be in communicating, it's
Oh.
never gonna be
No.
enough.
No, you're absolutely right, sir, I can't argue with you on that
Yeah.
one.
But if we could maybe wait till the next meeting or something, recommend adopting this and give the opportunity to include either in the utility bill and the newsletter, just one more pledge, then we'll get just about every media option that we have available to us.
Personally, I'd sleep a little bit better with another attempt.
If I could also, Linda, can Amy do analytics on the website to see how many people have actually looked at that page?
Yes, I think we can.
Okay, so let's, maybe I could suggest this, utility bill goes when, goes out when?
The 24th or 25th.
Okay. Maybe if we did that, we could do just another push on the Facebook and social media, and then, any email distribution list. I thought we had an email distribution list that we were gonna use. I know I have one from the old comp plan, I can dig that back out too.
And distribution list to send to whom?
So to email and blast out to people that are on an email sign up.
Developers, or?
Just general public that signed up per
Those who
email.
probably attended the
news.
public meeting.
Maybe you don't have that.
I don't have
Okay,
that.
all right, okay. Okay. A lot of times, stuff in the paper, the stuff goes in utility bills, we never have a whole lot of success with that. People see that and they trash it, they don't read it. Emails that come often are a little more, people will read the topic, and if you see zoning code update and you're interested in it, then they'll dive into it. Nothing is, like you said, you're never gonna do enough, but those are some things that we can do that are simple and cost effective. I don't know what it takes to put a little flyer postcard in the utility billing, if that's simple or.
Well, I think it's important to target the ones that are affected.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, it's more legwork, but
Yeah.
this has to do with their future.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you're dealing with their properties and stuff like that, I think that's probably an important step to take.
The utility person too has emails for people who get their utility bill emailed to them. But then they also get the newsletter in that same email that the utility bill comes in, so they'd be getting two.
Oh, is your newsletter electronic?
It is for people who get
Oh.
a utility bill electronically.
Right.
It's paper for people who get paper bills.
Right. So to, to your point about, those major changes, these are the ones that we determined were the more significant impacts. Actually, I think this might be a little outdated. We know definitely that the trucking company is a pretty significant impact, although they're already kind of non-conforming sort of. These I don't think are as big. There are some generally on the perimeter of downtown, but as we looked at them, we're making it better than what they currently are from a zoning standpoint. I think Sheldon, your house over here, we talked about that last time.
A little bit.
But you're holding, it's a holding thing, so it's when you're ready to do something or whatever, we're not rezoning it to, single family or open space necessarily. It's future development at some point in time, given you've got a large lot, or you just stay the way you are as conforming. So this map shows kind of the major ones, and then this one, a little bit minor, and the reason we call these minor are that we might have changed density or lot sizes not necessarily use, or we change them from the PUD that they are today to a PUD-F, which means they're an existing PUD, so it's not really significant changes. So we talked about it at the staff level, and we ultimately decided we didn't need to send individual notices out to people. But if there are ones that are on here that you think we should do, you guys know the community better than me, if there are ones on here that you think we should send specific notices to, we can target, certain property owners and send out specific, or reach out to them via phone or something, to make sure we have that discussion with them, and here's what we're changing, and here's how you're impacted. And that would be, a worthwhile thing to do. There are a number of others that are changed that are just the name changes. So this is that traditional neighborhood from the core neighborhood, some of the C1 or the CM to light industrial district. So some of them are less significant, but the name changes, otherwise it stays the same. Agriculture to the development holding district. So we have them identified. I think we can do a little more outreach to those.
I think the main point is you need to attempt. I mean, if you say, somebody shows up and says, why'd you do this? We say, hey, we reached out for, more than we were required to and attempted as best we could.
I'm not trying to slow things
No.
down or stop things, but
Yeah. Mhm.
zero feedback is, as I mentioned before, is a touch daunting.
Correct.
I'd much rather somebody come in here and cuss us out for forgetting something than listen to that, I guess.
So why don't we do that? We'll do stuff in the newsletter, right? And we can do just some additional blast outs, and we can highlight those ones that we think are major changes and try to reach out specifically to those.
If we're assuming that we're gonna have a greater response on this, at our next meeting, would we again hold a public hearing for it?
I would say, the action today, I think, can be to, hold the public hearing open. Did you already close the public hearing?
Yep.
Mhm.
Yeah, you can always reopen the public hearing.
Yeah.
So, we'll just table any action today, and at the next meeting, you'll reopen the public hearing. I don't think we need to post again in the newspaper, that's the thing, but we can simply say in the minutes and then put on the websites and in the publication to people that we'll reconvene a public hearing the next meeting to be able to take public comment if people wanna come and provide that comment. We'll encourage people to give us written comment and talk to us via phone. Given the whole COVID thing, a lot of people don't wanna come to these meetings anyway, but they do wanna get their voices heard, so we'll encourage the written comment and have a phone dialogue. And then if we could use this discussion here, if there's any last minute questions or things you want me to go over in more detail, I didn't really get into much stuff at all, but if there's questions you have or things you want me to talk about, a lot of what we're changing are procedural and making procedures much more clear than they were before, and making sure things aren't conflicting with one another. So, there's not, I wouldn't say there's real significant changes to, creation of nonconformities and, other issue problems. We're more making things, work better. That was the intent, and I think that's what we've done largely. Now, there are a few spots that aren't important, but it's because the comp plan is saying we should do this. And so, if you have questions, let's talk about them now since I'm here, and we can talk through it.
Nope. Well, if we're comfortable then, gentlemen, I guess I would look for a motion, please.
We're making, the motion to.
Table.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to table.
We have a motion to table, do we have a second?
I'll second that.
A motion and a second, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? We will table, our updated Casson zoning code.
Okay, and we'll ramp up our efforts over the next couple weeks to reach out to folks. Please. Good.
Next up, we've got a table conditional use permit from Mr. Chad Stannard and his storage units. Do we have any comments internally on?
No, we tabled it from last meeting because we were lacking some additional information that had been requested, so information or not.
I included, Mr. Standard came in after I sent the email asking him for the information you wanted. And the email that he sent me back with the 5 points is included, and the drawing that he gave me is then included in your packet.
Thank you. Do you want to let this off, gentlemen, or do you have any thoughts?
Just one question, was everybody comfortable with what we determined as dust-free?
Which was, just,
The large
rock.
inch to inch and a half limestone rock, as to whether you're gonna consider that being dust-free.
I would be good with that.
Given the lack of residential around this area, I don't have a problem with that myself. No other questions?
No.
Sheldon, do you have anything, sir? No.
No, I was just the size of the rock.
Mr. Standard is comfortable with everything that was outlined in the CUP?
So, no fence, meaning, so anything that's parked there can kinda, there is no security of anything being parked there or anything along those lines?
Can I speak open?
Yeah.
That my plan is, yes, eventually to have security on the building. That was one reason a few meetings ago, that, was my idea to have one entrance versus two.
Mhm.
So that I can have the security camera on the one entrance. So that is my plan.
Okay. But no fence to secure anything I mean, anybody could drive something up there and park it if they wanted to, and nobody would be the wiser.
That's correct.
Okay.
Very valid point.
Yeah. The challenge with that is you're creating a nuisance that you can't do anything with, cause if somebody parks something there, I think the law requires you can't touch it for like 30 or 60 days without giving notice. And so I'm just, I'm trying to be devil's advocate here without any security there. With the storage facility, most everybody's putting everything in a storage facility and not trying to, hinder growth and being able to do something, but I just, I'm sure you deal with people who don't pay their bills on storage units. And there's laws, and I think the laws are probably the same if somebody were to just park something there, and I'm saying, somebody parks something that they don't wanna have, they just go leave it there instead of taking it to the junkyard.
I do have a specific spelled out contract as far as,
Yeah.
T's are crossed, I's are dotted, specifically spelling out that as far as just what you said, as far as that my liability as far as that goes.
Right.
But we would have a contract, with the customer, and there would be specific that they would have, it'd have to be drivable, or specifically,
Yeah.
more so what I've got interest is campers. That it has to be, if it's an RV, it'd have to be able to drive there, not just tow it there, in other words, and then, no junk.
I think I had touched on a point too about possibility of putting something in there with, that it's licensed, updated, might also help you in the.
Correct, that actually would be a very good point.
Yeah.
My concern is somebody parking something there that doesn't have a contract with you, cause there's nothing to stop them from doing that.
But
Then-
the nice,
yeah.
Well, the nice thing about conditional use permits is that we can say something to the effect of if it becomes a
Correct,
nuisance or
yeah,
law
yeah.
enforcement is being called out to address those type of matters, we can review the inclusion
Yeah.
of a fence as a part of it,
Yeah.
so.
I'm just bringing up more of the common sense. Without a fence, you're potentially opening up to things that you necessarily can't control, which then says if there is a nuisance, you'll either need to another conditional use permit and bring things up to bring things up or something along those lines, so.
And if that would be the case, I guess I would probably my assumption would be is just work with the local officials.
Yeah, yeah.
If that would be the case.
Yep.
Do we have a copy of the conditions that was outlined?
Oh, they were in the last packet.
Yeah, I'm just looking through my files to find F three, right?
That's gonna be a while ago.
So there are three conditions, right? That's what everybody has, that are in the recommended CUP. Usable dust-proof condition within 6 months of construction. And then, permit application include grading site and lighting plan relative to adjoining property. And then external storage shall be allowed with proper screening, a parking plan, and proper surfacing of the parking area. If your concern is security, I think you could very reasonably add something to the effect of, some kind of security provision be monitored and if needed, be added, at some future date, if we don't know that it's needed today. But that way he doesn't have to come back and amend the conditional use permit, it simply becomes an administrative enforcement thing. Otherwise, it's public hearing, council meeting,
Yeah.
planning commission council meeting. So I think it would be appropriate to add some kind of condition relative to that helps, with the whole, public safety nuisance prevention. And as this is a, planning commission making a recommendation to council, I think the direction to staff would be a condition of approval that you add a provision regarding security, and we can deal with the wording on that with the applicants and before it goes to council. Does that make sense, Linda?
Mm-hmm.
Good, because I didn't know how to word it.
What's that?
That's a good thing, sir. I was trying to think of how I word it myself and didn't come up with anything terrible.
Yeah, I mean, I think that something like that, often we end up working with the attorney too, to make sure that it's something that's defendable. We could word something that's, okay, great, but you can't do anything with that. So we would kind of work with the attorney and make sure it's worded so that we give them enough teeth that it's something we can actually implement.
Sounds good to me.
Sounds good. Any other questions or thoughts? If not, I'll look for a motion, please.
I'll make that motion.
And that motion is specifically?
Exactly. What would be good wording for this?
Motion
So-
what he said.
Yeah,
You could make a motion to recommend approval, with the noted conditions in the resolution, and an additional condition, and I think if you just say noted conditions in the draft resolution, which is fine, because it's here, with an additional condition that addresses security concerns, as worded appropriately by staff, and allow the staff to work with the attorney and the applicant to make sure we get the wording right to deal with security. Unless there's more about security that you wanna provide in that specifically, you can add that at your own. But you can keep it very general and just direct us to do that.
Yeah, let's see. Guess I'd make the motion that, I lost my train of thought already again.
Something to the effect of, motion to approve an amendment to the conditional use permit, with an additional condition outlining, security, should it become a point of public hazard.
So we'll make a motion, to allow it, conditions of what we've outlined in the, under general, security, and what else would be, what should we have?
that enough to give some guidance, guys?
There's a lot to it.
Think I could drive better, huh? Probably spell better too, but.
So we'll make a motion to move to approve the noted 3 conditions in the staff report and an additional, condition that addresses potential security concerns as drafted by the city staff and attorney.
Absolutely amazing, thank you.
Yes, that is.
We have a motion as stated, do we have a second?
I'll go ahead and second that.
We have a motion, we have a second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion approved.
Still in amazement of the motion, so.
Truly impressed, so. Thank you for coming, sir, I appreciate it, and your patience.
And we'll work on that and coordinate with you, get it ready for the council meeting next week, right? The 23rd
Yes.
council meeting.
Can I have one extra comment?
Please.
I was gonna stand in front and I was going to first and foremost thank the fire department. That was our son a week ago Friday, that was in the head-on, for their promptness that it could have been very bad. So, I don't think they get thanked enough, so.
You are welcome, that's what we're here for.
Thank you for saying something.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have anything else we need to discuss tonight?
No, the next meeting is October 12th, which is Columbus Day, but we are open, so we will still have our meeting. We don't take it as a holiday,
It's a holiday?
not for us.
For some,
yeah. For some, so if you have a holiday,
Yeah,
we're still
no.
meeting that night.
If there's nothing else, I'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Thank you all.
Adjourned.
Thank you. Thanks.